The film will be shown on a cold and rainy night. He is Michael. We'll call him Mike. He woke up from his sleep because he heard a strange sound in his house. He went to find out what the sound was until... Mike was awakened by the sound of knocking from his neighbor named Joe. They got to know each other. Joe asked why Mike was sleeping on the floor. Mike said that he was a little tired. Joe told Mike of his intention to welcome Mike as his new neighbor in order to create a peaceful environment. Joe said that he and his wife used to be close to the residents before Mike. Joe also wanted to confirm what Mike was doing so Joe was allowed to enter the house. Joe said that if Mike needed help tidying up his things, Mike could rely on him. Joe asked about Mike's job. Apparently, Mike is a software developer who is currently taking a break and has chosen to stay at this house. Joe explains himself that he is a retiree and a current salesman. As a good neighbor, Joe invited him to dinner at his house tonight, but Mike was distracted by seeing the unlocked. In the evening, Mike got ready for dinner, not forgetting to check all the doors to make sure they were all locked. As a good neighbor, Joe asked if Mike had installed internet, smoke, and carbon monoxide detectors. Mike decided to live alone from before he lived with his parents in the house his parents now bought. Even though Mike is now alone, he still has an older sister who is not far from where he lives now. Joe again asked about security. Had Mike replaced all the locks in his house because a few weeks ago Joe's house was broken into? Mike also asked in detail about the incident. However, Joe said that he didn't want to talk and was a little sleepy, so Mike went home. Mike made sure all the keys to his house were locked and rushed to bed. In the middle of the night, Mike heard the sound of the door opening. He looked out and saw the back door of his house was open. Feeling scared by this, Mike decided to just continue sleeping. The next morning, Mike checked all the items and put the caterpillar in the drawer, but Mike was surprised by a knock on the door. Apparently, Joe gave him a ticket, which Mike got because Mike parked his car on the street all night. It was a violation, even though it was in front of his house. Joe asked how he was. Mike said that he didn't get enough sleep because last night someone entered his house. This incident also happened yesterday, when Joe caught Mike sleeping on the floor. With full attention as a good neighbor, Joe advised Mike to change all the locks on his doors today, or he should install a camera in his house. Joe advised Mike to use a sleep monitoring application. He might experience sleep disturbance. Mike also ordered a house key replacement service. At that time, Jennifer's older brother contacted Mike told Jennifer that he had moved and needed to unpack his belongings. Mike told him about all the incidents he had experienced and said that he suspected his neighbor, Joe, of being too nice and controlling. Mike also intends to buy a firearm just in case. In the evening, Mike was seen who had set up a sleep monitor on his cell phone and when he was fast asleep. Suddenly he heard a sound and goosebumps rose on his neck. He saw a scary black shadow. Mike couldn't move. All he could do was close his eyes. Thank goodness it was just a dream. The next morning, Mike checked his sleep monitor. At first, he only heard the sound of himself sleeping like he was delirious. But when Mike played the second audio, he heard the sound of someone walking on the floor making noise. Mike also ordered a security camera. Now the locksmith he ordered has changed all the locks in his house so that no one can enter. At the same time Joe came and approached Mike, he said that his house had been broken into again, therefore Mike asked for the previous tenant's contact. Mike sent an email to the previous tenant and explained all the events he experienced in the house. Not long after, the notification that Mike ordered the package would soon be received. And suddenly the previous tenant called and said everything that the house was haunted and there was a lot of supernatural activity in it.
House is haunted, Michael.
You saw demons in this house?
Get out of that
listen,
house.
Nancy,
Mike had to leave it. Outside the house, the package courier had arrived at his house. He also installed all the cameras and made sure they were good. He rested in a chair and accidentally fell asleep. Mike woke up because the air temperature had turned very cold. Heard someone knocking loudly on the door and asking for the door to be opened. Because the air outside was very cold, Mike couldn't help it and told the person to leave. Suddenly, behind his house, another person appeared, knocking on the door. Now Mike is terrorized by the many people wearing black robes in his house banging on his door to open it. In the morning, he got a message from Joe about the electricity not turning on, and when Mike played back the CCTV footage, he didn't find anyone in it. But Mike saw footprints on the floor. Because he felt like he was being terrorized, Mike decided to buy a weapon to protect himself, and he was given a little training in using it. When he saw the results of his shot, it was quite good for a beginner. Mike tried it again, and now there was one shot that hit the target's head. Because of that, Mike was able to pick up his gun that day. When checking Mike's background, the seller asked whether his family had any mental disorders. Mike answered that there weren't any, but the seller didn't seem sure about that. When he got home, Mike prepared his things, made a doorstop, and put back the CCTV that had fallen. When he wanted to sleep, Mike also prepared some bullets so that he would be ready if someone broke into his house again. Who would have thought that all this time Mike was the one who was making the floor noise that he had previously suspected, opened the refrigerator, opened the door and walked to the car, and he went back into the house without locking the door. But as he was heading towards the hallway of his room, Mike suddenly realized and thought there was someone else in the house. So he took a gun and checked his surroundings. The doorstop fell, making Mike startled, and he fired 2 shots. He checked outside, but there was no one. Joe came to Mike in a hurry to ask him to come in and asked what was going on. Mike explained that there was someone in his house breaking into the outside door and damaging the CCTV. At that time, 2 policemen arrived who Joe called because they heard gunshots at 3 in the morning. Mike panicked and told Joe not to tell them. Joe approached the 2 policemen and said that what had just happened was just a misunderstanding. Joe returned to Mike's house to ask and calm Mike down, but Mike was a little annoyed because Joe didn't believe what he said. After Joe came home, Mike found out about Joe on the internet. He suspects that Joe is the person who has been terrorizing him, and he doesn't forget to buy a CCTV to increase the amount of surveillance, because Mike can't sleep now and calls his sister Jennifer to say she will visit him. Now that Mike is at Jennifer's residence, Mike's older sister, he told her about everything he experienced while living alone. He had a lot of anxiety. He often had bad dreams that seemed to make it difficult for Mike to move, and it was like someone was terrorizing him.
Can I help you?
Mike got a notification about his CCTV. Apparently, it was his package that had arrived. As the night passed, Mike felt sleepy. He decided to sleep, but outside the window, Mike saw the shadow of someone opening the door at the same time as someone approaching Mike.
Are you okay? Sorry.
Did you hear?
Apparently, it was a dream. Jennifer saw Mike scared in his dream. The notification on Mike's cell phone told him there was activity on his CCTV. It was Joe who was seen peeking at his house. Full of anger, Mike rushed home. He had suspected that Joe was the one who always terrorized him every night. Mike took the gun and emptied it just in case. He rushed to Mike's house in the morning. Without saying much, Mike pointed the gun at Joe so that he would admit what he had done. But Joe explained that he just wanted to know where Mike was and how he was at the moment to make sure everything was safe. Mike didn't believe it because Joe was the one who called the police to arrest him. But Joe said it was a misunderstanding. Not wanting to take the risk, Joe managed to knock Mike down easily and took his gun just in case with full maturity as a good neighbor. Now Mike will not be accepted for a while. Joe advised Mike to check himself, his psychology, and about his sleep problems. Maybe Mike was experiencing sleepwalking. When he returned home, the door apparently wasn't open, and all his CCTV had been taken by someone. Mike contacted Joe again and asked for help. He asked for his gun to be returned, but Joe ignored him. Mike installed more cameras that he had previously ordered. In the morning, he decided to go to the doctor and tell him everything he had experienced. The doctor diagnosed that this was the reason why Mike was experiencing all this. Mike was not ready to live alone, so he decided to return to his parents' residence. While in the car, Mike looked at his ticket. Tonight, Mike intended to ask the police who were patrolling his neighborhood, so Mike decided to just sleep in front of the door. When Mike woke up, he realized that the police were going to ticket his car, so Mike asked whether the officers saw someone trying to enter his neighborhood while on patrol. Unfortunately, the officers said no, and instead asked Mike who fired the gun yesterday morning. Mike didn't get an answer, but Mike did get a ticket. Mike now met Joe and his wife to apologize. He said that he had gone to the doctor, and the doctor found the problem. Namely, Mike's mental condition, which could be hallucinations and insomnia. So Mike decided to return to his parents' house and leave his house now. Mike packed his things and called his parents to tell them everything that had happened to him and that he was going back to live with his parents. He found video recordings and papers.
You flip the cameras. Mike?
A sound that sounded like theft door. It was the balcony door on his roof. Mike was shocked and rushed to Joe's house. He told Joe that there was someone in his house, took the gun by force, which made him fall, not wanting to take the risk that Joe called the police. Mike tried to search his balcony and found that the place was very dirty. He didn't find anyone, but when Mike came back down, in the middle of the house there was already a person holding a knife, and said that he only wanted to use Mike's power source. Mike told him to be quiet and he would call the police, not wanting to go to prison. The stranger threatened Mike by saying that he didn't want to hurt him. Feeling accused, Mike finally fired his gun, but the gun was empty, and he had to survive the attack from the stranger. Fortunately, the police came, who made the stranger run away. Not wanting to be labeled crazy again, Mike chased him and struggled to restrain him. Fortunately, the police arrived on time and caught the stranger. At the police station, Joe returned Mike's cell phone, which had fallen, and apologized because he didn't trust Mike. Now the police have checked his house and stated that the house is safe to live in, so Mike can stay safely. Mike looks traumatized by the incident, but his older brother makes him strong, and the ending is extraordinary.